Forbes Books presents The Great Digital Transformation with GERARD SZATVANYI, highlighting the pioneers that reimagined possibilities and reimagined businesses. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and on today's podcast, Gerry and I will be spending some time with Dominic Stow, who's OSF's Regional Vice President in Australia and New Zealand. We'll be talking about the impact of digital transformation on the B2B level and how Gerry and Dominic joined forces down under to transform the digital landscape. Gerry, I feel like the old TV show Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, except as Where in the World is Gerry? Where are you right now, Gerry?
Yeah, we are in Dubai. We have an event with the team here, and we are taking this opportunity to actually also talk a little bit about very interesting topics. So I thought it's a good idea for us to just record a podcast here.
Of course, like anyone would, just go to Dubai and record a podcast. And this time around, we are joined by Dominic Stow. Hey, Dominic.
Hey, how are you doing? Great to be here, although very hot. As you can imagine, Dubai's pretty punishing. That's a pretty punishing sun coming through the window. So,
Dominic, no one's feeling sorry for you, just so you know.
I go for the pity for a second, but the bar's looking good.
All right, so guys, we're going to talk about digitization versus digital transformation once again. But before we get started, Dominic, I want to start with you because you are a newer member to the OSF family. Within the last year, your company was acquired by OSF. So talk to me about your life before and after this acquisition, what you were doing, and then what you're up to now.
I founded in 2010, a company with a couple of other directors called Adept Group. And we actually came from a program project management area, and we worked with large organizations actually doing digital transformation. That wasn't a buzzword. 2013, 14, that happened. And when that started happening, we saw the opportunity to start to back a product set that would really center and allow companies to build off. And we built a Salesforce practice around the customer being at the center, and that grew steadily across New Zealand and Australia. And then things got crazy. We started to grow really quickly, brought on a lot of good clients, and then Gerry here, I thought it was a prank call. He actually called me from a train station. I think you were in Bucharest. I don't know where he was, to be honest. I could hear trains in the background.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, I want to talk to you guys about
London.
Yeah, I want to talk to you guys about working together. And I was like, okay. And I took his name down and I went away and Googled OSF, and they were real. I thought, oh, okay. And there he is. Gerry is there. And I thought I'd never hear from him again. And then we caught up a bit, and then we talked about investing in Australia and New Zealand and growing. And that then turned into an acquisition. And now I look after the region for OSF. Been on board now for about 40 months. We've almost doubled in size already. And we're having a ball.
That's great. And Gerry, talk to me about what attracted you to Dominic, besides him looking handsome in the sun in Dubai with a beautiful black shirt over there. What was it about Dominic and his team that was so attractive?
You heard him talk customer-centric projects, and you will hear him saying a lot B2B and Salesforce and digital transformation. So these are topics that are also very core to what we are doing, and we wanted to develop the APAC region in itself. So we like the people, and the topics are very complementary to what we are doing. So I said it makes sense for us to kind of join forces and build something much faster, much bolder together.
And for you, Gerry, was it more about the key? I mean, obviously the team looked attractive to you, but was the location a big part of it, that New Zealand, Australia factor?
Well, it is good because it really helps our entire time zone, APAC. It's really concentrated around those time zones, and we want to develop that time zone properly to have a very strong support for our customers in that time zone. So that's definitely, the location is one criteria, but I think the most interesting thing is people and expertise, in this order: people and expertise. We believe the team there is just really amazing, and I obviously like Dom being part of the team, so that's working out quite well.
And I always wonder about acquisitions because, like you mentioned, people's a big part, but the product is obviously very important as well. So how did you come to find that not only was the product that Dom offers, top rate, but also the people. Like what goes into that sort of acquisition mindset and to know what's going on under the hood at a company like that?
We have an acquisition roadmap that has very clearly defined criteria, and if a potential acquisition target falls in those criteria, then we are looking into, okay, can we get along with the people? Do we like each other? Do we have some chemistry? If that checks, then we will obviously go into a much deeper, with what we call a due diligence process, where we look into all the details and see how the details match and how each day-to-day process works between us. And if that checks as well, then it's a match.
And Dominic, for you, when you got that mysterious phone call from Gerry at a train station, much like a Jason Bourne film, were you in the mindset of maybe we're close to that point where we can't scale up on our own and need to be acquired? Was acquisition even in any part of the recesses of your brain, or did that come out of nowhere and then you're like, oh, this makes total sense for us right now?
Yeah, no, it was in the recess of the brain. So we'd grown significantly for that 12 months period prior. I had started to look, and there comes a point, I actually sat down at an innovation forum years ago, and I sat with Rod Drury from Xero, and I said to him, what's the bit of advice you'd give an entrepreneur? Because that was the whole session. And he says, know when to sell. And I think that's a great point. And what I realized was that we really needed investment to grow the region. You don't go into Australia half-baked. You go in and you really have to be serious about that market. It is actually a big market. We were doing well, but I could see under the normal profit and loss. So we'd already talked to a few investment companies who they were investment companies. They didn't quite, take him on the journey of what we were doing around Salesforce and digital transformation was sort of interesting. Again, yeah, but what's your product? And you're like, well, the products, we create IP around it. We do this and that. But what's your product? And so when we started talking, Gerry and I, we just lined up, about what we could do in the region, what the investment would look like and how we'd go. So it just made sense. You just know when it's right.
And for added context, talk to me about the sort of the technosphere of Australia and New Zealand. Before we started recording this podcast, I joked that all my Australian friends always complain about the internet in Australia. I know that's not your issue, but I'm just curious, what's it like down there? Is there a big startup tech culture down there? Just give some context as to what it looks like and how you fit into it when you started the company.
Yeah, okay. # plug Australia, New Zealand. Obviously, for those astute people can hear I've got an English accent. I've been down there for 22 years. And actually, part of the reason I landed there is there's they call it a number 8 wire approach to things. It's around going out and giving things a go and challenging. And also a big thing about Australia and New Zealand, they've got those scaled economies. So larger companies can go and trial technologies and approaches in a relatively sophisticated market with pretty good infrastructure. It's not too bad, the internet, as we discussed before. But it just allows them to proof point ideas and concepts, and then they quite often go bigger and wider, go to the North American market. In terms of innovation and products, I mean, both Australia and New Zealand have got some absolutely incredible tech startups. I'm just always blown away of what comes out. Weta Workshop's based down in Wellington. We all know they do most of the movies and all that. That's the big end of town now, but they started as a couple of guys in a garage, right? And that's they just took on Hollywood. Would you believe it? These two crazy Kiwis that were down there, and next minute they're doing it. And that's really the mentality, and I really warm to it. I like that entrepreneurial, and it'll probably be tied up with what we're going to talk about. It's around taking calculated risk and doing things and not being afraid to fail and actually learning from it and then developing. And I think, we got it's a great region. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. And Gerry, for you, with OSF, and you talked about earlier about the fact that you want sort of a global reach with the company. You want to be able to touch all time zones. Have you done that so far? Are there parts of are there specs of the map that you'd love to expand to? Just out of curiosity, just wondering what could be next for you.
Well, we cover every major region pretty well. One area where we are still not covering that well is Africa, and there are some markets in Africa like South Africa and Nigeria that are developing quite fast. It's amazing what's coming out from there. So yeah, those are some regions that we are looking into covering at some point. But yeah, I would say especially the regions and countries where e-commerce is growing a lot, we are very present.
Great. All right. So Dominic, recurring theme on this podcast is digitization versus digital transformation. When I say those words to you, what are the initial thoughts that pop in your brain?
Oh, it's a great question, and it comes up quite a lot. So digitization to me is quite a mechanical thing, replacing processes with technology. It's quite, I think to a business can offer operational value and all that, but I don't think it really offers true value. And a digital transformation for me really is around reinventing the whole customer experience through digital channels, and it goes above any particular division of a business. It sits across everything, putting the customer at the heart of everything, as opposed to digitization, which may be point within a business to go and improve things. That's probably my simple answer on.
Yeah, and Gerry, when it comes to digital transformation with Dominic and his team, how did you know that they would be able to handle this? Because that's what OSF's all about. It's all about digital transformation. Why did you know that they were the ones to be able to handle that kind of, I guess, responsibility in that region down under?
It all comes down to how you engage with your customer and how do you challenge your customer, because that's also part of our job, is to show up and not just to take orders, but really to challenge what they want to accomplish. And I've seen them in action. I've seen how they go about things. So right there, I knew that that would be the right attitude, the right culture, the right fit for what we are trying to do as well. So that's how I knew that was the right mindset.
And Dom, we're going to talk a lot about B2B and B2C here, but as a B2B, before you were acquired, that's sort of like dance of B2B. It's like, what's in it for me? Everyone's always thinking like, what's this person selling me? I'm getting these random emails from all over the world. How did you embrace the concepts of B2B, but have sort of that B2C touch? Because we talked about all the time how a lot of the B2B relationships now are becoming a little more B2C. How did you sort of take that dance and were able to scale up your company because of that?
Yeah, so B2B's, it's pretty complex. And for people to wrap their heads around it, and ultimately there is a push to drive towards that B2C experience. I think companies struggle in actually envisaging it, and it starts with where it's put in the business. So how did we approach it? I guess the first thing is get some B2B projects under the belt. And we didn't learn. I mean, over the years, you learn what's going to be good. But what you do discover very quickly is you've really got to talk around the customer. You've really got to talk around what the vision is for B2B. You've got to challenge some of the thinking in businesses. It's not just being a technology implementation. You've got to do that. But then you don't want to overboil it. You've got to deliver some value. And then, so it's really around that longer term strategy, but working with clients to get those wins on the board that give that give the board and the funding, the next level to go to. It's really around working with the customers to challenge the way they think about their customers and all that. And I mean, typically B2B has always been EDI, just an order comes in and it happens and happy days. But that market is getting so disrupted now. Sure, it's still very common for very big B2B transactions, but there's the whole long tail that's going on, and there's marketplaces coming in, and there's some real complexity. And I guess for us, our challenge is just staying ahead of that curve all the time, and it's a hugely changing market on that side. But you're definitely seeing B2B from an experience heading towards B2C, but B2C has a much simpler model generally. So the B2B model.
think Uber for shipping, the shipping industry. It's a very interesting example, is that the shipping industry in itself, and we go through this entire logistics and supply chain issues now. We have items that are not arriving and everything, and why? Because many companies still operated these industries according to ways that were like 40 years old. And now there are companies that approach it the same way as Uber approaches the B2C market. The same way and the same processes, they are trying to converge towards this new way of managing the shipping industry, new ways of doing logistics. So that's a very good example of how this Uber experience converges with what has used to be the logistics, the supply chain industry, and the way they are doing business.
And Gerry, you're a bit of a trailblazer in this department of having sort of like this B2C touch in a B2B company. How do you think people can get into that mindset of the less transactional and making more of the experience? I mean, this is obviously what you do at OSF, but how can people sort of develop that sort of sixth sense of business as opposed to the old ways of B2B?
First and foremost, you need to really think of it not from a business angle, but from a customer experience angle. We use in our day-to-day, we use all kinds of gadgets. We use cell phones, we use internet, we do shopping, we do all kinds of stuff. We have a car that has some kind of a gadget on top of it. We use maps, we use geolocation, we use all kinds of things in our personal life. But why wouldn't you bring that to your B2B context? Why wouldn't you want to do the same things in maybe different way, slightly different way? In a B2B context, why can't you do like the video calling? Why can't that be a much more of a reality? Not in the way to just communicate, but also in the way you operate business, in the way you set up your business processes. So these are all things that come from the B2C experience, from the consumer experience, that we need to challenge a little bit more. Why wouldn't we use these things? Why wouldn't we bring them into our context? So that's how it really starts. That's where you challenge. That's where you and you have to step back and see, well, maybe 10 years ago we didn't have good internet, but now we have Starlink.
Yeah.
So why not challenge a little bit the assumptions that we didn't have good internet and now we have good internet. We have 5G. We have all kinds of new things that we are actually using in our day-to-day. We are using in our personal space. So the same approach should be taken also in the B2B space. And this is what we are doing. And Dominic knows this very well. This is how we challenge our customers as well, to bring new ideas and new ways of doing things from the personal space, from the B2C space, also into a B2B context.
And Dom, this word comes up a lot when I talk to Gerry, and it's about challenging the customers. And I just know from speaking to people, they don't like to be challenged. So how do you sort of handle that? I mean, because at the end of the day, you've got to do your job, and part of your job is challenging what this customer expects. So walk us through that.
Oh, crikey. Okay. We've got a couple of hours, haven't we?
You are turning into an Aussie. You're using crikey already. Jeez.
Yeah, that's right. I threw the crikey in there for the people. It's a tough one because every business has its way of working. And, as a digital transformation consultant that goes in, we have to respect they know their business really, really well. So the first thing is to respect that. But it's also our job, and typically we run quite facilitated workshops. We have IP around running these things, so we did it many times. There is a bit of a repeatable rinse wash process that you can go in and actually sit down and take what they believe is their strategy, B2B, and then through the workshops and looking at the lens and again putting the customer at the center of it. No doubt, every time what was initially the thinking starts to change within the first 2 to 3 weeks and all that. So we always go through what we call a discovery process. And I think most companies should do that. It's a really sensible thing. we make sure we identify all the stakeholders in the business. And I said it a little bit earlier, this isn't just around, the head of B2B. This involves marketing, it involves service desk, it involves everything. It's the whole package. You're going to look at it from a customer. So we really try to bring in those that discovery period to really understand where we can hit some value, where we can take some steps, what's the right platform that's going to take us forward, where are the pinch points. So, it's all very well ratcheting up your B2B, but suddenly people go, oh, our fulfillment systems can't handle that, and we haven't got the process behind. So challenge those. So typically at the end of the discovery is you find there's technology changes, but there's a significant number of people and process changes, and it's running those in tandem and making sure that these things all lead on the journey. And then there's also work around finding out more information and then going live and learning, and then going back to your customers and hearing what have we got right, what have we got wrong, and then you'll have other effects push on. So if your B2B is really successful and you start grabbing areas and markets that you never did before, then you find your call center might get more calls. So have you geared up and thought about that? So have you got the right service desk? Have we got a single view of the customer? And these questions just keep coming. And you can see why people get bogged down, but you've just got to start going and trust the process. And if there's anything I would say, it's about that. Go in with your eyes wide open. Don't overbake it, but understand it's a transformation and a journey. And I was asked a question recently: does digital transformation ever stop? No. I think it's a continuous journey because technology is changing, customers are changing. I mean, who thought about COVID? So political, economic stuff changes. So you've just got to continuously adapt. So it's really adopting a different mindset, I think.
Yeah, and the way of thinking of digital transformation should almost be taken the same as cybersecurity. Again, when you're cybersecurity, it doesn't mean it's over. It's a journey, much like digital transformation. And so it's embracing that ethos. And speaking of ethos, Gerry, we talk about challenging a lot, and that's really a driver of OSF. Where did that sort of ideology, ethos come from, where you knew you need to challenge your customers in order to make them successful? Was that just from the beginning of OSF's very scrappy startup phase, or was that something that you developed over time?
Well, I always had this mindset that it's not because something works that it cannot be done better. And this we've had since we started the company, and this constant challenging of the ways we are doing things and this constant change and innovation, this is very central to our culture as company. And I think the same approach then transpires in what we are doing with our customers and how we are engaging the challenges, the opportunities, the projects that our customers have, with the same mindset of, this is all fine and it works, but it might work just for today. Maybe it's not the right way to do next year, or we have better ways of doing it, or we can bring something that can allow you to increase your market share, to go abroad, to be able to go into new markets and new products. So these are the types of challenging that we are doing, and it starts by challenging ourselves. And we have this kind of a mindset of, hey, let's improve, let's get better, even if things are working. But this is probably the most difficult thing to do when things are working, when things are having good results, to challenge yourself. And guess what? That's the best time to challenge yourself, because it's in terms of business change, it's the easiest time to change is when things are going well. But it is also, in the same time, paradoxically, it's the most difficult time to change because everybody resists. But from a business point of view, it's the right time to change. You change when things are going well. You change when everything is fine. You don't start changing when it's suddenly you're in a crisis or you have an issue or whatever. You change when everything is fine, and you change when things are going well. That's when you need to change. But it's also the most difficult because people are going to challenge you and say, why do we change? things are working. Well, because we prepare for next year.
Right. It's I love using sports metaphors, and it just reminds me of, some of the premier soccer clubs, football clubs in the world. If you're a good club and Ronaldo or Messi becomes available, you're not going to be like, nah, I think we're okay. We don't need those guys. It's almost like you need to take that sort of mentality, right, Dominic?
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that. I mean, every year they swap their players around, even though they won.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with Gerry. It's, if you take just before COVID, people were interested in really accelerating their B2B. Then COVID came along and there was the big, oh my God, what's going on? And a lot of companies got impacted and they slowed down. And you could see a number of them immediately stopped change. It was like, what's happening? What are we going to go? But the ones that embraced the new initiatives, and B2B was one of the outcomes of that. It was that wake-up call. Actually, we're just not ready and we need to do it. And some of them grabbed it earlier. But what we're seeing now is the companies that have come back and are now healthy again are now doing it as well, because they've realized we can't just keep the status quo. We need to go in. So I totally agree with what Gerry's saying. It's a lot easier to do when you're doing well, rather than a panic station. So we've got to do this because it's not the best position, because you're not truly going to understand your customer at the right point in time. I think it's not a market reality when you're in the middle of a pandemic. But it is at that point. But in a year's time, it's going to be a different market.
It's time to take a break, but coming up in the second part of our B2B talk with Dominic Stow, OSF's Regional Vice President in Australia and New Zealand, Dominic shares how the pandemic has motivated companies to transform digitally.
You're seeing now that there's an appetite across all the business functions to unify, put that customer at the center, do better. It's not just about making lots of money now, it's about keeping your customers.
This has been The Great Digital Transformation with GERARD SZATVANYI. To participate in the conversation, go to GERARDSZATVANYI.com. The Great Digital Transformation is a production of Forbes Books.